everybody. That doesn't seem like it works, does it? Yeah? Okay. All right, if at any point you can't hear me, please just let me know. Thank you guys for coming. I understand there was a little bit of difficulty with the parking and unexpected snow, but I'm so happy you're here. Today, of course, we are going to be talking about the Mediterranean diet and menopause. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Monica Marcello. I am the registered dietitian at RVNAhealth, and I want to air out the elephant in the room. I have not been through menopause, but I have studied it. It was part of our education, and I have worked with a lot of clients who are in their either postmenopause or in their menopause transition. So I feel really good about the information that I'm going to be presenting with you today. And with that, I do just want to share a little bit more about myself. I did my undergraduate and graduate degree from the University of Connecticut. I have this little picture of me diving because I was a diver at the University of Connecticut. And I share that because a lot of my interest in nutrition was, I was 14 and was like, this is what I'm going to get into. And it was pretty selfish. It was because I wanted to learn how I could fuel myself so I could become a better athlete. I wanted to be more competitive. 13 years later, lots of degrees in continuing education, I have virtually no interest in sports nutrition anymore, and I'm really interested in longevity, gut health, and overall how food relates to quality of life. So I am representing RVNAhealth, and we are a comprehensive healthcare company servicing all ages and stages of life, and we do this sort of broken down into 4 service channels. We have the Be Well channel, which is primarily our community health and wellness. This is what allows me to give this presentation to all you fine people today. We have really our bread and butter, which is our Get Well service. That is our home care, nursing, and rehabilitation program. So basically they come to you in the home and help you get better from a surgery or injury or hospitalization. We have our Staying Well channel, which is our private duty nursing and care. And then lastly, our Comfort Well, which is an extension of our Get Well, primarily to support folks at the end of their life. Now, my role at RVNAhealth, I get to be involved in virtually all of those service channels. So I support the nursing and rehabilitation team via the Get Well and Comfort Well channel. Of course, I get to be in the community. And then lastly, what I spend probably the majority of my time doing is one-on-one individualized nutrition consultations. And additionally, we host once a month a cooking class, and of course, this month is going to be on Mediterranean diet and menopause. And we are doing chicken souvlaki. We're going to make homemade pita, homemade tzatziki. So if you are interested in that, please just flag me down or flag somebody down that works here at the end, and we're happy to get you into that cooking class. We are offering a promo. I'll tell you guys about that after, because I know what you're really here for is the Mediterranean diet and menopause, and I want to share as much good information with you as possible. So this is just an outline of what we are going to be talking about today. I do want to start out high level and just provide some education around menopause. I feel like we talk a lot about that, we use that word a lot, but I feel like we almost all have our own meanings associated with it. And then we'll just talk about what are the facts, like what do we know about the Mediterranean diet and menopause, and why am I here today sharing this information with you. And then what I'm going to do is really break down each piece of the Mediterranean diet and show you why that's specifically relevant to supporting you through this transition, and really give you that nutritional information on what to do, how to do it, and how you can implement these changes into your life. Now, I do want to preface this PowerPoint by saying this is a ton of information. This is more information probably than you would even need to implement to make a successful change. Whether your change is to just enhance longevity, whether it is to minimize hot flashes, to promote healthy weight loss, this is more information than you would need to be successful at that. So with that, I don't want you leaving here feeling overwhelmed. I want you to leave here feeling like maybe there's 1 or 2 nuggets that really resonated with you, and maybe you're going to look into later. Maybe you're going to think about that later and actually implement those changes. So please, I want you to feel inspired by this information, not overwhelmed. So, menopause. Menopause is actually defined as 12 months after your last period. So all of that sort of changes leading up, which can be from 7 years. The average is about 7 years. It can actually be as long as 14 years, is menopause change, perimenopause. And it can actually start at the age of 45. Now, during perimenopause, the production of estrogen and progesterone primarily decreased, but they can also sort of fluctuate, right? So it's not just like this steady decline, it's fluctuations in these hormones as well. And now when women enter postmenopause, right? So again, after that 12 months after your last period, that's when you're at the highest risk of heart disease as well as bone loss. Now, estrogen affects many different functions and systems in the body. So this imbalance can affect our cardiovascular health, our bone health, cognitive function, collagen, skin health, and our circadian rhythm. So really until I dove in preparation for this presentation, I really didn't understand the full breadth of estrogen and what it influences, but it virtually touches or impacts every major organ in our body. So I really wanted to highlight, so you can see here, right, it affects our heart, our liver, our bones, skin, uterus, ovaries. Ovaries are the primary place of production for estrogen. We can also produce estrogen in our fat tissue. So if you do, this might be important, not necessarily for you, but maybe a niece, granddaughter, daughter, that being too thin, right, can actually cause hypothalamic amenorrhea, meaning that you actually lose your period because your body is not able to produce enough estrogen. We will talk a little bit more about body weight throughout this presentation, but so again, ovaries, that primary source of estrogen production, can affect our brain and can affect our breast. Now, I really want to talk about the mechanism of action on 3 major areas that estrogen affects. The first one, many of you are probably questioning this, worried about it, is weight, right? A lot of us, or I suppose a lot of what my clients come to me with is they feel like they hit menopause or they are in their perimenopause stage and they feel like they are retaining weight much differently than prior to this. Now, there is a physiological mechanism behind this. And yes, a lot of it can be attributed to the decline in estrogen. Now, estrogen is primarily responsible for our hunger fullness cues, particularly regulating hunger. Estrogen makes sure we're not hungry all the time. And of course, being hungry can lead to excessive weight gain. Now, when we have this decline, this is why we might experience increased hunger, increased cravings, and additionally to this, we have this decline in estrogen, but we also have a relative rise in androgens. A common androgen hormone is testosterone. And moreover, what this does, so right now we have lowered estrogen, so we're hungrier. This is a physiological fact. And in addition to sort of that rise in estrogen, we have a redistribution of body weight. So if we were once pear-shaped, now we store our body weight on more of our visceral organs and in our abdomen. And so that is some of the primary causes or mechanisms of why we feel like weight gain or gaining weight or weight loss becomes very sticky in this stage. Now, it's sort of a domino effect. Again, we have this decline in estrogen, relative rise in androgens, particularly testosterone, makes us, whether we know it or not, hungrier, less satisfied, less satiated, maybe we're having more cravings. Additionally, now we're storing our adipose tissue or fat around our abdomen, and what this does can exacerbate insulin resistance. I would love to see a show of hands of folks who have maybe heard about insulin resistance, particularly relative to the new and very popular medications, Wegovy, Ozempic, GLP-1 agonists. So has anybody heard of this insulin resistance before? You can put your hands up high if you know it. Okay, that's a lot of people. So insulin resistance obviously is a very complex mechanism, but insulin resistance is yet another mechanism, in fact, a mechanism that I see a lot in my practice that makes weight loss very difficult. I'm not going to dive into sort of the ins and outs, but what I will say is high level, we need insulin to appropriately and effectively store our sugar that comes from our diet. Now, when we have insulin resistance, is exactly how it sounds. Our cells become resistant to effectively storing this sugar, and we produce more and more of this insulin, and as a result, our metabolism decreases because we take this sugar, if you will, and it goes into our fat cells. We create more adiposity as a result. And this makes it really difficult. So in summary, it's like your body is holding on to nutrition way more than it needs to be. And this is why you might look at your husband or your daughter or whoever and say, I'm eating 1/3 of what you're eating, and I'm not losing any weight. And a lot of that can be responsible, or insulin resistance is likely responsible for that. And again, like, Monica, how did we get here? We got here because that visceral adiposity, that visceral weight, that sort of apple-shaped body can exacerbate insulin resistance, again, making weight loss more difficult and weight gain a little bit easier. Now, the last thing, actually there's two more things about estrogen I wanted to speak about is our risk for cardiovascular disease. So remember I said it's like a domino effect. Be reminded that cardiovascular disease is not a men's problem, or not just a man's problem. It is the #1 cause of death in women. And a lot of this is, again, because when estrogen declines, we have this visceral adiposity, we have insulin resistance, we've got this chronic low-grade inflammation, and there's also evidence that suggests that our cholesterol, estrogen is somewhat protective in that aspect. So estrogen can support lower LDL, so lower good cholesterol. No, I said that wrong. Estrogen can support lowered bad cholesterol and can support higher amounts of the good cholesterol. So when we sort of decrease it, you can imagine what happens. So we've got alterations in our fat profile. We've got more fat around the abdomen. We've got more inflammation associated with insulin resistance. And it really sets up this picture for cardiovascular disease risk. Now, the last point I want to talk about as it relates to estrogen and menopause is our bone health. So many folks know you turn 60, 65, and your doctor, your primary is saying, let's get you in for a bone scan. Many of you might be thinking to yourself, well, I've already been diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis. Why is this happening? Again, primarily the mechanism of estrogen. So we are turning bone over all of the time. That's one of the normal physiological mechanisms of bone is we're constantly breaking it down and building it up. And that's how we have healthy bone. Nothing new about that. However, when we have this decline in estrogen, we're not able to build up bone as well as we once were, and that is why we have an increased risk for osteopenia and osteoporosis. I know it's a lot of information. I will promise I will be taking questions at the end, but really, truly, I do believe knowledge is power, and I think it's important to understand briefly or high level the physiology behind what is happening in your body so you can first and foremost validate yourself as this is a physiological mechanism that is associated with aging and not something that is all in my head, and I deserve to be validated. And once I understand or have a provider that understands why this is happening, I can then sort of begin to find answers as what I can do about it to support these changes. So I just want to provide you with a little bit of evidence. Why are we talking about the Mediterranean diet? So a large-scale study found that the Mediterranean diet increases more healthful aging in about 7,000 women. Now, healthy aging was defined as living to 70 years or longer. I know we want to live longer than that, trust me, but that's how they defined it in this study. No chronic disease, type 2 diabetes, kidney disease, no major declines in mental health, cognition, physical function, and this was a pretty large-scale study. Moreover, another large-scale study found that the Mediterranean diet, so a Mediterranean diet either supplemented with olive oil, Mediterranean diet supplemented with nuts, or compared to a low-fat diet, the Mediterranean diet with olive oil and with nuts was far more effective in reducing cardiovascular disease risk than a lower-fat diet, which also takes a lot of the information that we were told, certainly what we were told growing up, and completely changes it. It says, you know what, that's not right. We actually want to do a diet that's high in healthy fats to protect our heart. Additionally, I wanted to highlight a few other studies that just support these changes that occur with menopause, particularly changes in cognitive decline. So the MIND diet study showed that adherence to a MIND diet, which is very, very similar to a Mediterranean diet, was associated with reduced risk of cognitive decline. Now, additionally, I know, again, weight being a big question, a big area of concern, there was another large-scale study that showed they took basically two diets that were in what we call low calories, right? Most of us are vaguely familiar that weight loss, if you eat, right, doctor says, eat less, move more, that's how you'll lose weight. So what this study did was they took them and they put them into two groups, and it was both low calories, also known as a calorie deficit, and they found that the individuals who were in the low-calorie diet but Mediterranean low-calorie diet had improvement of insulin resistance compared to those who were just in the low-calorie diet, not following any specific dietary approach. And then lastly, my favorite study to highlight is called the SMILES trial. And this looked at the relationship between mental health, specifically depression, and the Mediterranean diet. They took 12, they had 12 weeks, and they had two groups. Now, both of the clients were experiencing depression. They put them into two groups. One group was the social support group, and another group was a dietary intervention group, where they did 5 visits in 12 weeks with a registered dietitian, instructing them on how to implement the Mediterranean diet. And they found that just after 12 weeks, 30% of the participants in the dietary intervention group had achieved full remission. So that's 30% of the individuals in the dietary intervention group achieved full remission of depression. So really, these studies, high level, show that there's good evidence to suggest that the Mediterranean diet is protective against cardiovascular disease, promotes healthy aging, decreases cognitive decline, encourages mental health, mental illness, or decreases mental illness, and can encourage healthy weight and reduce insulin resistance. Okay, hopefully you believe me by now that I'm here giving you nothing but the facts. But I did want to share my nutrition philosophy because I think it ties in very nicely with a lot of the approach supporting the Mediterranean diet, and that is that intentional nutrition is not about limiting your lifestyle, but rather encouraging you to live a larger life. And so I'm going to dive into what I mean a little bit more with that by talking about the stress hormone connection. Now, we are going to highlight, or I am going to show you what the Mediterranean diet actually is, and most people will be surprised that it's very to do with food, and it has everything to do with your lifestyle. And I think that this is incredibly important, particularly for the menopause, the woman in this population. So we all know that we experience stress, but we may not know that stress can actually affect our health, our longevity, and it makes it really difficult to implement successful nutrition changes when you are constantly in a stressed out environment. So chronic stress and high cortisol, which is your primary stress hormone, leads to things like wear and tear on your muscles, slower healing time, impairment of cognitive function, disruption of sleep, difficulty gaining or losing weight, and worsening inflammation. So it primarily body does this by way of disruption of healthy ovarian and thyroid function. So cortisol can increase progesterone, resulting again in that imbalance of estrogen and progesterone. And now this can happen in any stage of life, but remember, in menopause, we already have this imbalance and fluctuation in these hormones. So when we are constantly in an elevated level of stress, it is just going to exacerbate this. Now, moreover, stress can also cause low blood sugar and low energy and vice versa. So you often wonder, do I feel lightheaded and hangry and cravings because of stress? You sort of feed that, and then the cycle continues. Now, there was one study that showed 40% calorie restriction, right? Going back to sort of this weight piece of it. Calorie restriction led to heightened stress response, which caused women to stop cycling and led to overall impact on reproductive function. So I also wanted to highlight that you guys will hopefully pick up on the overall theme here, that just reducing your calories, understanding that weight can become a primary concern at this age, but just reducing your calories can actually exacerbate stress, right? And we know that having worsened stress, more heightened stress, is actually going to disrupt achieving our goals, right, of weight loss or weight gain from a physiological mechanism. Now, Mediterranean living, again, that very first pillar of a Mediterranean diet is all about your lifestyle. And I will say, anecdotally, as a provider, I have seen this so many times. It is so difficult to make nutrition and food changes if you have no plans to change any part of your lifestyle. It is virtually impossible. So here are just some recommendations, sort of what you can do about it if you feel inclined, if any of this resonates with you. First thing is pay attention into your inner landscape. How are you feeling? You guys, so I wanted to actually highlight this. So some signs of stress might be tense shoulders, shallow and rapid breathing, racing heartbeat, digestive symptoms, poor sleep, negative thoughts. And for some of you, this might be hard to identify because this might be your baseline. So encouraging you all to, any sort of deep breathing can be beneficial, but try to sort of reconnect, if possible, with your inner landscape to reestablish your baseline so you can even begin to recognize when you are feeling stressed. Sometimes you can quite literally feel your cortisol being elevated. And while that's not a great thing, it's good in the aspect that you can sort of recognize, okay, this is a place or, whatever I'm doing right now is taking me to a space that I don't want to be. We have to have a normal, adequate baseline so we can even recognize those moments. Now, number 2 is manage your energy. Again, this is so crucial to making nutritional changes, is picking your priorities. I have so many clients say to me, if you came over to my house and you cooked for me and shopped for me and prepped for me, I would be fine. I would do this in a heartbeat, right? Sometimes it's not even the knowledge. Actually, oftentimes it's not even the knowledge, but it is the other influences around how you can get that food into your body. It is the cooking, it's the prepping, it's the storing, it's the thinking about your family that can really cause a lot of overwhelm in many folks. Completely understood, but the only way to make sustainable changes is to identify your priorities and start saying no. And if your priority is to make a food or nutrition change, then you might need to rethink what is the best way that you can facilitate that. Number 3 is to make relaxed a way of life. Some people, right, many of you folks may still be working, you may be taking care of your mother or father-in-law, you may be also taking care of your kids at the same time. This is objectively a very difficult time of life. And I think sometimes we just need permission to relax. And so this is your sign. If you were wondering if you should get a massage or take a bath tonight, I am your sign that you should take a moment for yourself. Now, lastly, and this is the one that I feel, I'm a very passionate person, but if you can imagine, I feel even more strongly about number 4 than I do anything else. and that is to get creative and get curious about food. Don't get me wrong, it is absolutely possible, it is possible to do 10-minute meals that are quick in the kitchen, you're in and out. I work with a lot of patients on this. But where I find the most success with my clients is when they get comfortable exploring recipes and thinking differently about, again, prepping, shopping, storing, the whole sort of life cycle of food, if you will. Again, changing your nutrition is not just changing what am I putting into my mouth. It is the whole life cycle from the shopping, prepping, storing. So I want you to think differently about that. And here, or I would encourage you to rather. And here are some of my recommendations. The first one is, if you want, try to get an herb garden and keep that on your shelf. You do not need to have a green thumb. I want to say this is the brand Arrow Garden. Seriously, it's like no work. You just put the pods in, and you always have fresh herbs, which are super important in the Mediterranean diet. Number two, one of my absolute favorites is community-supported agriculture, CSA. So CSA primarily runs May to October if you're lucky. You might have them in Wilton, Ridgefield. They encourage you to do your own research, and essentially what it is you sort of support a local farm and you get to pick up a fresh bag of local vegetables, some fruit, every single week. And that is an amazing way to get adequate diversity, support the local ecosystem, support the local community, and just feel a little bit more connected to your food. So sometimes it's not even about what do I need to eat differently or what is my recipe. Sometimes it's taking a step back and thinking, how am I shopping and prepping my food? Where is it coming from? And hopefully that just drives inspiration more than anything. It's not about, oh, it has to be organic, it has to be this. I just want you to go to stores, if you can, that inspire you. Shop at places that make you feel good, again, if you can. Additionally, creating a garden, if possible. And then lastly, Purple Carrot specifically is all vegan. They are a meal delivery service, which is also a good option if you're feeling sort of like same old, you want to try something different. Look at different meal subscriptions, right? That could be enough to sort of take you out of a place where you feel like you're in a rut and want to get more inspired and creative with food. Okay, so Mediterranean diet. This is the typical Mediterranean diet pyramid. Like I said, the very first pillar of the Mediterranean diet is physical activity, natural movement, and a lot of that is because of the way that it influences our stress and it influences our lifestyle. Now, the second tier, but the first food tier, if you will, of the Mediterranean diet is a lot different than what we see, I would say, in sort of mainstream media. It is moderate carbohydrate intake. It is high fat intake, and moderate protein intake. So what we're really emphasizing here is primarily fruits and vegetables. There is no wrong one. Whole grains. So whole grain bread. Certainly encourage you guys to get creative in the kitchen and start making bread. I actually just took on this in 2024, so I'm happy to share my experience so far. It's been far easier than I anticipated. And TBD, I think we are going to host a cooking class on it as well. But you can certainly make your own bread, but there's also other brands, whole grain brands that you can purchase. But even better than that is unprocessed whole grain foods like quinoa, farro, bulgur, buckwheat are all really great options. Even I would say like a wild rice, black rice, so a little just tip if you will, the more natural color you can find in your food. Natural color is an indication of antioxidants, and that's one thing that's very distinct about the Mediterranean diet. It's very colorful. So even the grains aren't white, right? The grains have color to them. So that's another way that you can think about it. Additionally, extra virgin olive oil is their primary source of fat. So what I recommend usually is extra virgin olive oil for low heat cooking and sauteing and dressings. Now, if you're going to do higher heat cooking and baking, you want to do an avocado oil. Still a very, very healthy, heart-healthy fat. Additionally, it prioritizes beans, nuts, and legumes. So a lot of their protein sources are actually coming from beans and legumes, and then when you pair that with a whole grain, it becomes a very complete source of protein. So there is that extra thought, right, where in like our poultry or red meat, we know, okay, this is, 4 ounces of this steak is a good 30 grams of protein, I get all my essential amino acids, but when you do a whole grain with a bean and a nut, or just a whole grain and a bean, you're definitely getting that complete amino acid profile, and you're likely to meet the adequate amount of protein that you need. As I mentioned, seed, herbs, and spices are an incredibly important and often understated part of the Mediterranean diet, and that's why I almost really recommend that little herb garden. Basil, mint, parsley, dill. Not only do they just make objectively any dish better, but they are very good for you. And surprisingly, just again as another little tip, many of these herbs and spices, yes, they are incredibly anti-inflammatory, but they're also very good for your gut. So some of them have what we call antimicrobial properties to them as well. And so they can help keep that sort of bad bacteria that can live in your gut in check. So that's sort of a little added bonus. Now, the third pillar, the third tier, is seafood. So seafood is an incredibly important part of the Mediterranean diet, particularly fatty fish. So again, you can see that theme is high fat. Some of the favorite, or my most recommended fish are going to be your salmon, herring, mackerel, sardines. I love sardines. I wish I could get everybody interested in sardines. Very few people take me up on it. But also an incredibly important part. Now, one thing I want to say with fish, I feel like, for whatever reason, our culture, we've always thought protein is chicken, protein is meat. But virtually, there's the same amino acid profile in fish. And there is also the same quantity per gram, or per ounce rather, in meat, in like poultry and red meat protein as there is in fish as well. So I don't want you to think that somehow it's inadequate just because you're getting it from fish. It's an awesome source of protein. Then you can see as you work your way up, this ideally is what we want to do less and less, right? We want to do poultry such as chicken, eggs, cheese, and yogurt weekly. Now, I will say when I recommend this diet, I am not so strict. Granted, it's a little general, moderate portions. Really what I like to highlight is that, poultry a few times a week, because objectively it is a good source of protein, particularly chicken breast. Eggs, I really don't like to limit, because they do not raise your cholesterol. Eggs are very, very heart healthy, so contrary to what doctors somehow are still saying this, I don't know how, but they are. Eggs don't raise your cholesterol. Eggs aren't bad for your health, so you heard it here first. In fact, eggs are very, very high in choline, and that is a mineral that we are often undernourished in as well. So I do encourage eggs as an important part of the diet, cheese and yogurt as desired. Now, again, at the very top is the least often is red meat, certainly processed meat, and sweets, and added sugar. So that is sort of the outline of the Mediterranean diet. And now, like I said, what I'm going to do is sort of pick apart each aspect of the Mediterranean diet that I think is most relevant to folks going through the perimenopause or postmenopause, either the perimenopause change or if you are in postmenopause. I really wanted to highlight this little bit. Excuse me 1 second. So, protein. Now, this may sound a little counterintuitive because I just talked about how, protein, we think of protein as chicken and meat, but specifically for perimenopause and menopause, you need more protein than you think. And why is this happening? Because again, when estrogen declines, we are losing muscle mass. We have reduced muscle mass, and it's harder for muscle to, it's harder for it to stay on and for us to put on. Now, muscle is highly, highly metabolic. What do I mean by that? I mean that your body composition, right? Somebody could be 150 pounds and be 20% body fat, and, whatever else muscle, and then somebody could also be 150 pounds, 40% body fat, and even though they're the exact same weight, the person that has more muscle is going to be able to eat more food, more calories, more energy, and actually maintain their weight a lot better than the person who's got significantly less muscle on them. Now, this really ties back into menopause, because remember, when estrogen declines, it's very important for regulating our hunger and our fullness. So this is really a great way to naturally combat those changes that occur in menopause. So again, highly metabolic, it also helps with feelings of fullness and minimizes cravings. It actually works directly on a hormone called peptide YY that signals to the brain that you are full. Now, what I like to recommend is about 1 serving of protein with every single meal. And that's a minimum of 1 serving of protein with every meal. Obviously, my most recommended sources of protein are going to be your fish. So again, if you're quick, you want things quick, you don't have time, sardines, tuna, even canned salmon can be an option for you as well. But feel free certainly to make fresh fish as well. That's a great option. Eggs. As I mentioned, eggs are an awesome option. Now, if you are doing eggs, don't just do 1 egg. I know I said 1 serving, and so it begs the question, what is a serving? Granted, it's about 3 to 5 ounces of meat or fish in this case. Eggs, I want you to have at least 2. But the real reason I'm not answering what is a serving is because it's different for every single one of you. And even if you work with me individually, I will tell you, very rarely will I tell you how much you need. Because you're not with me every single day, and my goal for you is to intuitively regulate your hunger and fullness. Not to respond, oh, Monica says 3 ounces. I don't know when you're full. I don't know when you're hungry. That is for you to regulate. But generally speaking, I do find that people think 1 egg is enough, and I do encourage about 2 eggs. Other options are Greek yogurt, milk, soy, beans, and of course your poultry, particularly emphasizing chicken breasts over chicken thighs. Chicken thighs have a little bit more saturated fat, which is one of a pro-inflammatory fat. So chicken breasts are a much more leaner option. Now, something super interesting is along the lines of protein, I did mention soy. Soy can be in the form of edamame, soy milk, soy yogurt, soy nuts, textured vegetable protein, miso paste, tempeh, and of course tofu. Now, the 2 foods up there that got the most soy in them or most protein rather, are going to be your tempeh and your tofu. Now, soy yogurt, edamame, and soy milk can also be good sources of protein, but again, the most bang for your buck is going to be the tempeh or the tofu. Why am I highlighting this? So, soy foods contain something that's called phytoestrogens. And phytoestrogens are basically plant estrogens. And what they do, it's actually so fascinating, is they're kind of like an ultimate regulator. So on one hand, they can have a mild estrogen effect, mild estrogen-like effect, and they have been proven to be beneficial for night sweats and hot flashes, symptoms of menopause, of course. Now, additionally, they can also bind to estrogen receptors and block more potent and potentially toxic forms of estrogen called estrogen disruptors, which are found all over our environment, right? There's also, even research to suggest that plastic from a water bottle, and right, we're exposed to so much of it all the time in our environment. These are known estrogen disruptors. So what's really, really cool is that these phytoestrogens found in soy have this sort of regulatory benefit, if you will. And so usually what I recommend, and what's been shown in the research, is about a half cup of tofu or tempeh daily. Now I know that might be bizarre if you've never had tofu or tempeh at all. Now I'm telling you to have it daily. But there's different forms that you can get. So you can get silken tofu that can go really well in like homemade puddings, you can go in smoothies. You can make different sauces with it as well, like a peanut sauce on your noodles. So there are different ways to get creative with it. Tofu, again, firm tofu is really good if you want to fry that in a little bit of light oil with some rice and veggies. I just found a recipe the other day where you could steam tofu and put like a soy, sort of like a soy sauce mixture over it. Tempeh couldn't be easier to cook. Again, I know these might feel different because they're new, but I go back to my number 4 point about get curious and creative with your food. And so implementing these into the diet is a perfect way to do that. Okay, number 2 is fiber. The reason why, or a lot of the reason why the Mediterranean diet is likely so successful is because of the amount of fiber naturally that you're getting in the diet. So fiber is a type of carbohydrate that's actually not absorbed directly into your bloodstream. Fiber goes into your large intestine, particularly, and it helps be a food source for the live and active microorganisms that live in your colon. And this is really important and often underrated because your colon, these organisms that live in your large intestine, they need to be very healthy so you can adequately absorb and digest all of your other food. So if these organisms are not happy and not satisfied and you're not giving them enough fiber, well, they're going to have a hard time absorbing and digesting and really utilizing the other nutrition that you give it. Now, fiber, again, it's found in your fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, legumes, seeds. So virtually that's sort of the first food pillar, if you will, everything that was highlighted there contains fiber. Of course, there's some fruits or veggies that have more or less, again, similarly with whole grains, but fiber is key for supporting hormone health at this time. You want to have about 25 grams a day. Now, I also want to highlight another piece of your colon, it's called your gut microbiome, where all of these live and active organisms live. And in your colon is actually responsible, so some of these bugs are actually responsible for estrogen excretion. So depending on that sort of balance, you can have these bugs that want to, they can help guide the excretion of excess estrogen or the amount that is reabsorbed. So again, you really want to be treating these bugs well, particularly by means of fiber, because it indirectly affects your overall well-being. B, it helps with the absorption and digestion of other foods into your blood. And C, it actually plays a direct role in estrogen excretion and reabsorption back into the body. Now, phytonutrients. So phytonutrients are plant-based nutrients that we require not only for adequate nutrition, but for detox and protection against inflammation. Fun fact, phytonutrients is really just a fun word for fruits and vegetables. It sounds a lot cooler than it is, but I gotta get people's attention somehow. So again, fruits and vegetables, the Mediterranean diet is so filled with these, and there really is no right or wrong. I'm happy to specify maybe at the end about the ones that I really push or highlight, but the point is, eat what you like, eat what you can. Fresh, frozen does not make a difference. Again, eat what you can afford and what you are going to enjoy. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about as well with phytonutrients is this is a perfect example. If you don't have a healthy gut microbiome or you're having digestive symptoms, maybe related to stress like we talked about earlier, your body is not going to be able to adequately absorb all of these specific antioxidants back into the body where they can have their beneficial effect. So it is always worth thinking about the whole body, particularly your digestive system, and if you have any symptoms, because that might be a cause for why you're feeling so fatigued, or why you feel like you're eating well, but things are just not clicking, because you might not be able to absorb these nutrients. Now, the phytonutrient gap is something that many Americans are experiencing. And it's basically the idea that when we're not eating fruits and vegetables, it's not like those foods are so bad for us necessarily, but what happens is it takes away space for us to eat all of these good foods, right? So we only have so much of an appetite, and when we're not eating all of the fruits, vegetables, and things that have very high antioxidant content in them, again, we don't have, we're then going to be filling up our bucket if you will, with foods that are more pro-inflammatory and sort of vice versa. So I like to think about it that way as well. Okay, again, healthy fats, such a key, I keep reiterating this point, but it's such a key component of the Mediterranean diet. So healthy fats are found in actually our salmon, as well as, of course, of our protein, our eggs, our mackerel, our tuna. It can also be found, of course, in our avocados, our extra virgin olive oil, our nuts, and our olives. And so, yes, some of the primary food sources are the olive oil, avocados, nuts, seeds, and fish. And now my recommendation is we have about 1 serving with every meal. So we'll go over how to think about your meals at the end. But some of the best ways to do this are, again, fish. I say 3 to 4 times a week, so I do a little bit more than what's even recommended on the pyramid. Nuts are something that we can enjoy daily as well. And I love recommending healthy fats, 1 serving with every meal, because if you're not sure what to do a drizzle of extra virgin olive oil. Or how often are you cooking something in an oil, right? So it's a very easy way to get healthy fats in. And healthy fats are crucial for long-lasting energy. They contain particularly those anti-inflammatory properties, anti-inflammatory compounds that are so necessary for the longevity, the cardiovascular disease, the cognitive delay that is associated with menopause. Now, this is sort of like my eating 101. If you guys want to take pictures, I completely encourage you to do that. So, at every meal, the goal is to have protein, fat, and fiber. So to circle back for a second, jog all of your memories, make this make some sense. Protein is going to be our nuts, our beans, our fish, our eggs, our dairy, yogurt, milk, and our soy, primarily. Of course, there can be a little bit of chicken in there as well. Our fats are going to be our extra virgin olive oils, our avocado oils, our avocados, our nuts, our seeds. Fatty fish like salmon, sardines can sort of cross over into both. And then our fiber is going to be our fruits, our vegetables, our whole grains, and even some of our nuts and seeds as well. So you'll see that there's a lot of overlap, but the goal is every single meal, protein, fat, fiber. Every day, you want to aim for 6 to 8 servings of veggies or fruits. Now, I know that can sound intense or intimidating, but what I mean by that is it doesn't necessarily need to be like, oh, a serving is half a cup. A serving can be, you are sauteing something and you do garlic, onions, and celery. That's 3 different veggies right then and there. Really, my point with that 6 to 8 servings is just to encourage diversity over anything. So think about diversity more than quantity, and hopefully that makes that number a little less scary. 1 to 2 servings of whole grains per day, and 1 to 2 servings of plain dairy. Again, this is an excellent source of protein, and it's also great for calcium as well. So thinking about the osteoporosis, osteopenia, we do want to make sure we're getting adequate amounts of calcium. And then, of course, every week you want to make sure that you're getting diversity within those types of food. Enjoyment. I want you to enjoy your meals. Gone are the days where we're doing these diets that make us miserable. That is not how we create sustainable, just improved food-related quality of life and sustainable changes. And then, play around with, again, different colors and different textures of food as well. And then lastly, just to summarize, here are some top 5 foods that help relieve the symptoms of menopause. So of course, fish for the omega-3 fatty acids, as well as the added salmon. Mackerel, herring, tuna, sardines are the top, the best options. Yogurt, so particularly plain yogurt, is a great example. In fact, one study, I love this, found that folks who enjoyed 2 servings of plain yogurt every day, I believe it was over the course of 4 weeks, experienced significantly reduced anxiety. The reason being, likely for the beneficial role that yogurt has on our gut health. They were feeding the bugs, not necessarily via fiber, but feeding them via what we call probiotics, which are live and active microorganisms. Don't want to confuse you with that too much. Just eat your yogurt and feel good about it. Beans, again, so beans are an excellent source of protein and fiber, and can certainly help as well of that regular, consistent intake to support the Mediterranean diet. Tofu, particularly because of the phytoestrogens, so helping with night sweats, helping with heat flashes, and then nuts as well. So nuts can also have adequate amount of omega-3 fatty acids, and particularly the nuts, or the omega-3 fatty acids found in walnuts, have been associated with reduced risk of depression and enhanced memory. Here are some recipes that we have for you. Oh, I just realized I'm not talking a lot. That we have for you. So please feel free to take photos of these. There's just different ways to incorporate fruits and vegetables and fish and olives and healthy fats. Here is another one. Please encourage you to take a photo. And then I just wanted to highlight again, we do have our cooking class, so we're going to be talking about all this. It's going to be a super supportive community. That is January 31st, which is a Wednesday. I think Michelle's going to confirm that for me, at 5:30, and we've got 7 spots left. We are offering like a discount, so it's $10 off for you and a friend if you want to come with a friend. Like I said, we've got 7 spots left, and we're going to be doing chicken souvlaki, homemade pita, homemade tzatziki, and we've got a bunch of recipes and a toolkit and all that good stuff. Thank you guys for being, yes.
January 31st, 5:37.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you guys for letting me talk so much and being such an attentive audience. And if you have any questions, I'm here, and hopefully I can answer them for you. Hi. Yeah.
But usually I've heard that during menopause period you shouldn't be having a lot of soy.
Yeah, it is historically historically controversial. I gotta be honest, I don't know where it originated, because all of the research that I see is that soy is absolutely beneficial. So.
Yeah.
Is it?
Does it depend on whether it's organic or not, or non-GMO, that whole thing? Or does it?
In the research that I've seen, it really it hasn't. I think that more cautious providers would say organic, but I think for me, I encourage accessibility over anything. So if you want to do organic and that makes you feel good, do it. But I'm not doing it. So, any other questions? Yes.
Is there estrogen replacement?
Well, that would be hormone replacement therapy, and that would be is certainly an option you could discuss with your doctor. That is
helpful? Or
it's not my area of expertise. Again, it's called HRT, hormone replacement therapy. I would absolutely encourage you to have that conversation with your doctor or a friend who maybe went through it or knows about it. Yeah, sorry, I can't open one. Any other questions? Well, I'll be here. So, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.